The 7th of the 3rd, 2025. The time is 4 minutes past 8, and there are very many F1 centric threads, as always, at which we need to pull. We've got to talk about tyres for 26. Cadillac F1 entry now crystallised as official. We'll talk about Sir Lewis Hamilton and some of his statements that Ferrari going into 2025 potentially, probably have the best driver pairing ever in F1 history. Oh, the humanity. So too, we've got to reflect on Drive to Survive Season 7, some of the downstream ramifications. Max Verstappen not happy with the car going into Australia, contradicting what he said in testing. So too, McLaren sandbagging data that proves just as much. How are we doing this Friday though? We'll go long today, as we do Formula One Fridays, do you know what I mean? Talking everything Formula One, and it's building, isn't it? You can feel it just a tad. It's getting a bit techie, and I don't know. It's becoming acronyms, hybridized circumstances. Go on then. Let's talk about these tyres for 2026, because the drivers are kicking off in real time. Again, the 2025 spec of tyres have been techie, have they not? All over the show. It's been it's a struggle for them. Not least one Sir Lewis, Carl Davids and Hamilton, since every time he tries to put a hot lap in, Sector 3 loses the bloody tyres. They are mercurial, they overheat. This is thermal wear and tyre deck settings. How do you fend off for those if you're a fire-breathing dragon like Sir Lewis, who's been super aggressive, made a career out of being aggressive on the brakes in the braking zone? Well, tyres for 2026, the new rules and regs aren't going to get any better, apparently, lest we forget that they've been testing them on filming days. Here's what George Russell had to say. Driving on a 2026 tyres was a challenge. They are much worse when compared with the wider tyres we currently have. What? I thought they were instituting for a new set of compound to make them better. No. F1 purists will argue, why do you have the best 20 drivers in the world and they can't even put a hot lap in and go 100%? You want to see these guys and girls go at their quickest in the quickest machinery, no? So why do they have to manage tyres over the course of one lap in Q3? This makes no sense. But again, I think what we're speaking to is the evolution of Formula One. This article continues that the main problem that emerged on the first prototypes tested for the 2026 spec of tyres was severe overheating. What? We've heard this all before now. What are we doing? I thought that's what they were supposed to mitigate for going into the 26 rules and regs. What are we doing? Pirelli confirmed that this is the truth, with the annoying phenomenon being very much linked to the new narrower tyres. What? Okay, so look, take a step back and see the F1 wood for the F1 trees. I get it that the racing will be better if the aerodynamic footprint of the tyres was per se of the 2024 spec of tyres. What are we doing here? Get your SH1T together, FIA. Oh, by the way, Jody, Christian Horner and Zach Brown are handbagging, mate. We'll get to it when we talk about Drive to Survive. George's head is too heavy for the tyres. Oh, the humanity. You guys going hard at George every single time. Go on then, let's talk about some Drive to Survive. In fact, we'll do Cadillac F1 first. I presume that they were already in. It was all but official until just now, when it's been made official today. Cadillac F1 will be the 11th team on the grid in 2026. There are plot lines here though. Why now and why all of a sudden? Took Andretti like 24 months to get to the precipice, only for them to get rejected at the hands of Michael Andretti's getting his elbows out. Lest we forget, went up and down the grid trying to strong arm the likes of Toto and Christian Horner into signing a letter of support. That's never going to work. Millionaire/billionaire team principals come owners, if you're talking Toto Wolff. You got to shake some hands, foster some rapport, curry some favour. Strong arming was never going to work, but that's Michael Andretti's way. Now, however, under the umbrella heading of Cadillac, not GM, by the way, which is the parent member, but Cadillac F1 will be on the grid as at 2026. Even The reason why they've been attracted in conjunction with Ford and Red Bull is because we're shifting from the old school combustion settings. 50% of the combustion unit in inverted, or power unit in inverted commas, in 2026, you'll recall, will be electric, and that's got to mean something, right? If it's important for F1, durable competitive advantage, leveling of the competitive landscape. Lil Pleb, you're an absolute legend and far too generous. No, we're trying out here, do you know what I mean, to hold ourselves to account and have some proper F1 conversations whilst talking to the news and maintaining the modes of discourse. Go on then. Here's the chat about Cadillac F1. Crystallises the 11th team. However, why now and why so quickly when the likes of the legends that are Lucky Sons, High Tech, put in their application with all of their financial resources and that got turned down? We know that it's a two-stage process. Get the FIA, the regulatory body, regulatory capture any, which we'll get to rubber stamp it in the first instance, and then the teams and team principals need to rubber stamp it in the second instance. They, however, don't want to share more portions of the pie than necessary, and I understand that. If you've built a house from the foundations up, don't knock on my door with a view to try and rent a room after all of the hard work's been done. That's what Christian and Toto will be thinking, because we know that post 2021 and COVID, F1 was one of the only international sports to be putting on live sporting events over the course of COVID. If that's the case, and on the back of all of that struggle, if F1's done one of these, if the attention dollars for Formula One is now here but was here, then why would you look to divide the pie now? Surely therein lies the reason why dilution fee is going to be a conversation. Rumour is that Cadillac F1, for their sins, are going to need to pay $450 million dilution fee. Now, that's just standard, right, for any franchise. But the question is, the operative one, is $450 million enough? Most of these teams are valued anywhere upwards of $1 billion now. 450, some say, might not be enough under the umbrella heading of valuation and shareholder value. And then let me say this as well, since we're going to get techie things for a second. How about Mohammed bin Sulayem and what he's involved in here? We know that he likes to line step and he likes to traverse his scope and remit as far as being president of the FI. We know that. We get it. I get it. However, if you try and peel back at the layers, you will find out that he has as business affiliates guys and girls who work directly with Cadillac F1. Is that the reason why he rubber stamped Cadillac F1's entry to F1 in 2026 so quickly? Because High Tech only just the other day won their bloody court case. FIA tried to say that High Tech didn't have the financial resources requisite, and then all of a sudden High Tech were like, what are you talking about? Well, here's your exhibit A, B and C to the contrary, took them to court and ultimately won. So what's going on here? This makes no sense. But again, what else would you expect from the FIA if not them to be consistently inconsistent? Jody, that's how they were trying to frame it, Bobby. Go on then. Let's talk about Drive to Survive. My favourite subject. Why? Go on, let me ask the question this way. Non-rhetorical one. Umanch, you're a legend. MBS, mate. Turtle Dove. It's chaos out here. But MBS is up to... He's up to things. In fact, like while we're talking about MBS, before I move on to the next one. MBS ramification settings. He's peed off the wrong person in Richards and Reed. Can't just exclude them from the meeting because they won't sign an ad hoc, no impromptu NDA when they already have that instituted in their contract, and then think that you're going to rock up to the World Motorsport Council meeting and pass new legislature through institute for it, notwithstanding the fact that you're not quorate at the meeting because you've banned Richards and Reed. No, there will be ramifications from that. And I think Dave Richards is the one who's going to see to it. And I'm here for it. Done with the Mohammed bin Sulayem regime. Done with the lack of accountability. Done with the impromptu nature of it. Done with him travelling all around the world on a private jet and then trying to expense it to the FIA. I'm done with him keyking in front of the cameras, playing front and centre, being the Beyonce to the drivers, Kelly Wright. I'm done with it all. Conflicting demands or whatever, conflict of interest. But I'm done with it. I don't even want to. I don't have emotional bandwidth to talk to this chap anymore. In fact, why so I remember. Let me show you this, because Lewis Hamilton has spoken about the strength of the driver pairing that is Scuderia Ferrari going into 2025. He said this, that potentially he and Charles are the strongest driver pairing in F1 history. Oh, the humanity. Maybe not. How about Senna Prost? They weren't too bad back in 88, 89. Do you know what I mean? Are you going to contend that Charles and Lewis are stronger than that? It would be close. But I mean, Senna and Prost, both champions. On paper, I'd argue that they were probably ever so slightly stronger. And then, by the way, you see these pictures. You've heard me argue that Ferrari are nothing if not stubborn. Last year, we argued that they should put the pull rod front suspension on then. They hesitated and dragged their feet and told us that what they wanted to do was bark up their own design philosophy tree, that they'd seen information in the CFD and the wind tunnel that told them that they didn't need to copy Adrian Newey's homework, which sounds noddy, more noddy now than it ever does. But at the bloody celebration the other day in Milan, with both Ferrari drivers doing donuts, we looked at Sir Lewis Hamilton's incredible car control yesterday. But check this one out. Roll the clip. I mean, what are we doing here? Lewis Hamilton is on a gazillion $1 million contract. Do you realise the extent of the injury that he could have had there? Like, what are we doing here? I mean, you can't even believe that that's a thing that could actually happen. That Lewis Hamilton, brand new Ferrari driver, looking to win an unprecedented eighth, that they could have him up there on that car, waving to his adoring Tifosi, and then very nearly destroy his bloody career. That looked like an ACL injury waiting to happen. If you told me that Lewis Hamilton ruptures his ACL, or at least done a cheeky meniscus, I would not be surprised. This is why Ferrari are still a chaos merchant going into 2025. They don't listen. They think that they know everything, and continuous improvement, much like Lando Norris, has never really been their bag. I mean, the front suspension thing, pull rod now, 12 months later, that's your case in point, right? Jody says Lewis is high on life right now. It seems, though it sounds, he's high on something. Behave yourself, Jody. I doubt it. The butt fall. It was funny, Andre, but it could have been very not fun. That looks very, very serious to me. I've seen people fall not as bad as that and do very, very serious injuries to themselves. So listen, Ferrari and Lewis need to pull their finger out, especially if they think that they're the best driver pairing to have ever driver paired. You know what I mean? Go on and let's talk about Drive to Survive. Chaos, merchantry, proper, oh the humanity. I don't even know where to begin. Go on then. Season 7, episode 1, business as usual. Now, I've been arguing that, of course, Drive to Survive is a necessity now more than ever for F1, if indeed they want to continue growing the sport. I was listening to a podcast yesterday during which they said of 1,900 North Americans surveyed, 53% of them F1 fans, or 53% of them said that they'd come into F1 fandom by dint of Drive to Survive. Drive to Survive is everything that F1 ever wanted it to be. For the longest time, they couldn't break North America because people weren't interested. NASCAR and IndyCar were the restaurants at which they dined. Now, however, by dint of Drive to Survive, some sexy auditing and some brilliant storytelling, all of a sudden, F1 has gone global. They've broken America in a way in which the Beatles even could never. And Netflix are massively to thank for that. However, amongst the F1 community, the purists are still shunning Drive to Survive. It's one of these, it's almost like revoke my F1 pimp card if you catch me watching Netflix. But I'm calling bull feathers on that. I watched a couple of episodes today, particularly the ones that I'm talking about here. Endgame, Business as Usual, and Frenemies. Chef's Kiss. Brilliantly done. brilliant storytelling in a way that Liberty Media and the F1 broadcasters, the internationally syndicated ones, could never go. Netflix Drive to Survive are doing something that the F1 bots are not doing. F1 is diversifying its content portfolio, therefore, and in doing so, capturing in a way that it has never before erstwhile, capturing new attention dollars. And that has to matter, chat. Listen, I was drawn in. I watched a couple. So I watched Endgame, which of course chronicles Christian Horner and the whole misconduct gate in a way that I don't think we'd seen. When talking about it earlier, loads of commentators were like, oh, stop talking about this old news. How is it old news? I've never seen this footage in my life unless you were one of the accredited journos who got early access to Drive to Survive. What are we talking about here? I'd never seen Christian Horner sat on the pit wall next to Adrian Newey, the last airbender, receiving notification that his WhatsApp messages allegedly had gone out to the public. All of the F1 accredited journos and all of the team principal. This is blockbuster. You can't write this in a book, for they wouldn't believe you. Hearing Christian Horner narrate the whole circumstance and plot in his own voice, in his own words, seeing the Red Bull press officer try and get his arms around the circumstance, telling the interviewer, Netflix Drive to Survive, that they can't ask any questions about the allegation specifically. And then Horner gets in the presser, and Andrew Benson, or F1 journos, are created equal. Some are created more equal than others. Andrew Benson pulls the trigger, launches some question bombs, the likes of which you might never have seen. The questions go as follows. How can we trust your investigation, Horner, when you're still here? Any HR investigation of this ilk would make sure that they suspend in real time all of the key protagonists. So therein lies the bias. You've fudged the books already as far as the investigation, with a view to make everything look all pretty and shiny from its exterior. What are you doing? Shout out to Andrew Benson for asking that question. Seeing how Christian Horner deals with it. Seeing him parade Jerry Halliwell at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Smile as fake as anything as they do. I just think it was blockbuster. I think it was genius. And if anything, what jumped off the page at me from that episode is that Christian Horner is a bull terrier. He's prepared to fight. So many times, Red Bull, the hierarchy, the shareholders, Red Bull GmbH, at least twice now, have been on the brink of sacking that dude. And then somehow he managed to wrestle survival from the jaws, maws of defeat, impending doom. Chaos Merchant, he's nothing if not a survivor. For whatever you want to say about his alleged extramarital activities, as far as a team principal, if I'm taking one into the trenches, that dude has a name as at 2025, and his name is Christian Horner each and every single time. Watch Endgame if you haven't already. It's the first episode. In there they touch on Carlos Sainz and the chaos that was him getting sacked in inverted commas from Scuderia Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton going the other way. All of that mad. The gub is it's crazy. It's impossible theatre and quite brilliant cinema, I would argue, notwithstanding its editing foibles. I mean, never let truth get in the way of a good story, Netflix would argue. Business as usual. First episode, Endgame. The last episode chronicles Max Verstappen's destruction ultimately of Lando Norris at the altar of the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos. Oh, the humanity. Shows you everything. And in that episode, you see the dichotomy even that is Max Verstappen and Lando Norris' relationship. They couldn't be more different as people and F1 peddlers. They are both pant-wettingly quick. That much you can't even argue with. Lando definitely. He's got the minerals, not necessarily, but he's got the speed and the racecraft probably too. But all of the other stuff, as we've been saying for a gazillion years now, is a massive question mark next to it. Let me tell you what I mean. In that episode, you hear Max Verstappen and the way that he talks. And again, the dichotomy is stark between those two. Lando talks like this. You'll hear him on that episode saying something saying something like this. I don't need to be this way or that. More than one personality type has won the Drivers' Championship. Go on then, Lando. What he do? Here's what he's on about. He doesn't want to change. That's the honest truth. He doesn't want to change his personality type. And Lando still doesn't think that he needs to change the extent to which he institutes for an aggressive wheel-to-wheel style of racing. He just doesn't think it, or at least he didn't think it in this Drive to Survive. He was like, I don't need to change. I don't need to. I know what I need to do. It's almost, again, we said before, right, there's a very fine line between delusion and coping mechanism, and I'm not sure on what side of that line Lando Norris sits. Max Verstappen, in stark contrast, the rare times that we see him on that episode, says as follows: I always wanted to be an F1 driver. That's my job now, and I want to win. I do not care about what other people think. And that's where Lando Norris and Maximilian Verstappen, foursome say soon to be 5-time champion, do one of these divergent settings. They are very different people. You see them at the end when Max Verstappen's finally won his 4th, and it's like Lando is kowtowing to Max. He says to him, you got lucky, mate. He's laughing and joking as if Max Verstappen hasn't just taken his lunch money from him. And I just think that something needs to change. If indeed Lando's going to fulfill his not insubstantial potential, then I think something needs to change. In addition to, by the way that he behaves on track. Now, people say that the way that he behaves, who he is as a person, is a reflection of who he is in the cockpit. Those two things are linked. They're not separate entities. And in that sense, when he gets on pole and he's got a fire-breathing dragon in Max Verstappen, for which he will need to slay defensive posture, get into turn 1, manage your do you know what I mean? He needs to be Michael Schumacher settings, and I'm not sure at this juncture, as at the 7th of the 3rd, 2025, whether Lando can do that without changing himself. I keep reading this Atomic Habits book, trying to get myself into some habit stacking. And it says if you're looking to change a habit, don't change the habit, change who you are. If you're looking to quit smoking, as an example, don't say, listen, I don't smoke. Say, I'm not a smoker. If Lando Norris doesn't want to get overtaken into turn 1, he needs to become an aggressive driver, because they don't get overtaken. And therein lies the problem. Frenemies, brilliant episode. Business as usual, really, really good. And Endgame 2, chronicling all the key topics. Listen, I'll get to the other episodes at some point, I promise. But I haven't had to harden up, says Benzie. 1000%. Absolutely making sense. How many psychiatrists does it take to change it, mate? I think Lando could do with it. And I don't say that in jest. I think that's a very serious thing, Macon, and not worth. It's not something that we should trivialise. But I think Lando, if again he wants to win championships, he could do with one of those, no? It didn't hurt Nico Rosberg. Una, you're an absolute legend, by the way. Nico Rosberg said every other day he was spending a couple of hours with a sports psychiatrist in 2015, 2016, the year when he ultimately got it done and managed to overturn a not insubstantial natural talent deficit to one Sir Lewis Carl. Like, that's what you got to do, right? There's a bloody, I don't know. There's a line of least resistance, and I hope Lando can travel it. Oh, and by the way, Lando in the documentary, or the docu-series even, talks about how he couldn't sleep after Brazil. I think he really thought he had a chance, and he did really have a chance. That's what's so bloody frustrating with the whole 2025 season. Lando was right there. It was there for him. Quickest car, etc., etc. But he says after Austria, he does do the bloody performative punch the wall thing. He's trying to look as if he's angry. He cares too much about what people think. Lando Norris, his words, not mine. And then Christian Horner ominously says, it looks like Lando wants to play with the big dogs, the big boys, and some will rise to that challenge. Others cannot, just don't have the minerals. Here's hoping for Lando Norris. Between this year and last, there will have been some variable changes made. Oh, and by the way, It happened across a Lando Norris YouTube channel, and you can see the dude putting in the hours. Go and check it out. He's going in hard, health assessment early in the morning. He's going hard. So I think physically he's going to be ready. But the mental question is the one that he's going to have to answer for. That's the exam answer. Again, maybe Lando has it. Maybe he won't need it. Maybe he has such a car advantage that will be less under the spotlight. I don't know. It's techie. Nando says, Blando, oh, the humanity. Una setting a channel record. Una, you're a different gravy. Thank you so much for donating the memberships out here. I appreciate you. Matt, Micah, welcome. And get yourself on the Discord. Get yourself on the community tab for the newsletter, etc. And you will, of course, get priority in the chat when we go back and forth on a Friday on Formula One. Fridays. Andre says, Una, you're a nice one, legend. Eddie says, all the purple sectors proper. Go on then, Andre. You have to play mind games in this sport. I just think you've got to understand the thing that I think Max benefits from, and he even says it in the bloody show. He goes, the F1 drivers that make it aren't always the best drivers in the world. Yeah, they've got talent, but it's the execution, it's the ability to deliver upon that not insubstantial natural talent. And that's what Max Verstappen embodies, right? He knows what he wants and he knows what he's prepared to do to get it. And it's that singularity of focus from which he benefits all the time, each and every single race. What makes him such a difficult proposition to beat, I would argue. But saying that, it's important that we know that Max Verstappen apparently, per the boys and girls over at the race, is none too happy with the RB21, its handling dynamic and its ability to win an Australian Grand Prix over the next couple of weeks. And this one's techie, because I recall Max Verstappen on day one, a tale of two testing sessions, right? On day one, Max Verstappen was well chuffed. He said that there are only good surprises, lest we forget that the foibles last year that they needed to solve for in that RB20 car, understeer settings, no longer having that double DRS that so characterised and allowed them, facilitated such great success in 2023. But neither one of those two things are there, and that's why they struggled so much last year, right, in 2024. This year, however, on day one, you'd be forgiven for thinking Max and Red Bull, Pierre Vacher et al. Had solved for that. Because Max said, you know what, good surprises only. Max went out and dropped a lap on a C2 that put him P4 of the top 14. Again, if absolute times is something in which you can be invested in testing, P4 of the other 13 in the top 14, he was the only one on C2s. And then when it came to put on the C3s, in Sector 1 at the very least, he was blisteringly quick. Sector 1 purple straight away, parked it up in the garage, and everything looked right in that Red Bull team. Jos Verstappen, big Cheshire cat grin, same two of Helmut Marko, two people who barely crack a smile these days. They look like they were loving it. Now, however, Max Verstappen he's spinning a different yarn. Something's changed, and I'm not quite sure what it is. Lest we forget as well, the rumour says that there's potentially more changes to come to that Red Bull. And again, when they unveiled it, loads of F1 aficionados were like, hang on, that's the RB20. They've changed nothing. Vacher to that said all the changes have happened underneath the car. Venturi tunnels on the underside of the front wing that's now flexy. Some say, though, that between now and Australia, expect to see a very different car in look and aesthetic. Christian Horner said that 99% of the bits and bobs on the RB21 is different from the RB20, but some people, I'm hearing, reports are indicating that there could be big changes between now and Australia. I wouldn't be surprised. That being said, Max Verstappen still has doubts that Red Bull will be able to fight for victory in the season opener in Australia in a week's time. Oh, the humanity, 10 days, till we get ourselves some proper racing. What their challenge was, as far as Red Bull between now and last year, was to broaden the operating window, less understeer, double DRS if possible. Nice to have. Verstappen, however, per this article, admitted that he doesn't think he can compete for the win in Melbourne, hoping instead for improvements within the first few races. Lest we forget, Umanch, you're an absolute legend, mate. Lest we forget that he has himself, some say that Max has himself a cheeky performance clause that means if he's outside of the top 3 after the 3rd race at Suzuka, that he can null and void his contract with immediate effect, go and get himself some cheeky paternity leave with a view to set up a $1 billion deal, a $1 billion contract deal with Aston Martin. They say a new beast has 3 tenths to spare, a machine so fast it's almost unfair, but the lion they must fight has 3 tenths in his mane, a behemoth who strikes like a storm in the rain. I mean, how lyrical can one be? Too much. I love that. I do like that. Go on then. So the information from Max Verstappen does conflict with what he said on day 1. So, but I just don't know who or what to believe at this stage. I get that it's testing and that you shouldn't read anything conclusive into the times or the numbers or what anybody else is saying. But as at March of 2025, it feels like the consensus is that McLaren have the whip hand in terms of being ostensibly the quickest car on the grid. And it's not just speed, it's not just downforce points in absolute terms, it's accessible speed and downforce. As soon as Lando Norris just jumps in the car, he goes with impunity, without compunction. It looks easy. Purple sectors instantly, barely needs to warm up his tyres. And that's why I suppose we want to take this seriously, right? I want to see myself a championship though. And I'm praying to the racing gods that not one of these teams has taken a leap on the rest, right? I want to see 10 teams in equal-ish machinery, particularly those who house the best drivers on the grid currently, being, of course, the bulls that are red, McLaren. So 2 Mercedes. And the other one, who I've forgotten. Ferrari, of course. Go on then. Let me tell you about this. Because Pedro Hidalgo of Planet F1 has written an article that alludes to the fact that McLaren are sandbagging massively. It's techie. It is techie. Make an NDA. You won't have to sign an NDA to watch Drive to Survive. It's I know, but then other people are talking. Oh, I can't even talk about it, mate. And I really would love to. Michael will be watching. So true. He might say Scroopy. Hobby ting, good sir. Sorry, Unai tried on. Oh, turtle. Andre says, Max will not be as good this year because of his baby and the car won't be there. Therefore, his focus won't be 100% on F1 and the others will capitalise. You heard it here first, says Andre. I mean, if past his prologue, it's hard to have a baby, your firstborn, and keep everything the same. There will be some late nights, some early mornings. You know what I mean? Your priorities will change. Lest we forget Fernando Alonso going through 130R said of Michael Schumacher that he knew that dude was going to back out because he had more to lose than Fernando, man from Oviedo, Astoria. That he knew that Michael had a family and kids to go home to. Of course, Michael was going to back out. So maybe you're right, Andre. Maybe Max's priorities will change. But anytime you put a microphone in front of Max's face, he says he wants things to remain the same. He wants nothing to change as far as his priorities. Why? Because he's a racer, nothing more and nothing less. Per Maximilian Verstappen's statements in Drive to Survive, he has a job. That job is to be an F1 driver. He's grown up all his life wanting to be that. And now that he's doing it, all he wants to do is win. And that's what makes his tenure at Red Bull all the more precarious, especially if they haven't designed the car commensurate to that statement. Go on then. Hidalgo of Planet F1, speaking about testing again and McLaren. Lest we forget that all the F1 aficionados that matter at this stage have Lando Norris and McLaren as the hot favourite. 35% of the time they say Lando Norris wins if you run the current championship under the current circumstances 100 times. 28% is what they give Maximilian Verstappen, F1 boy. Unu's hidden from the chat. Can you unhide? Let's have a gander. I'll go back to that, I promise. What happened to Una? Una can't gift out memberships and then be hidden. What's that? I'll go back to that. Apologies, Una, if you've been hidden accidentally, because that's not good enough. But go on then. McLaren testing faster slaps. Here's what Hidalgo says. Of McLaren, what you want to look at during testing, they were super, super quick, but quick in a very different way to, let's say, a Carlos Sainz Jr. The reason why Carlos Sainz Jr. was so quick during testing is because they were A, maxing out their engine, and B, maxing out the speed that they were taking through the twisties. Carlos Sainz from the onboard was pushing that car to within an inch, no millimetre of its life. Lando Norris's laps, in stark contrast, when he was going quick, looked really, really easy. Hidalgo adds as follows. One of the biggest things as far as GPS, you can look at that to try and determine the fuel load or lack thereof. But if you look at the top speed through the bloody speed trap on the quickest laps, that will tell you everything that you need to know, right? And on the quickest laps, let me read out these to you. Day 2, so go on, I'm going to read out some of the quickest laps. Gabriel Bortoleto, 319 kilometres. Albon, 318. Pierre Gasly was on the 317. 316 all for Lewis. Hulkenberg, Sonoda, Antonelli, Lawson, George Russell, Isaac Hadjar. No mention, you'll notice, of the boys and girls over at McLaren. No Lando Norris and no Oscar Jack Piastri yet. You have to scroll down further. Esteban Ocon, 314 kilometres. This, by the way, the quickest that they were going through the speed trap on their quickest laps over the course of testing. 3 days worth of. Carlos Sainz, 314 kilometres. Lance Stroll, also 314. Max and Jack Doohan to 314 kilometres. No sign of the McLaren boys, eh? That means, therefore, that all their engines were turned down. McLaren boys, Lando Norris last on 308 kilometres per hour top speed. What? So how was he able to bang out those quick laps then? If the engines were turned down so much? That is absolutely bonkers. That means that, okay, so everybody sandbags, right? Sandbagging is a relative exercise. But if they were sandbagging to that extent, Houston, we have a problem. Oscar Jack Piastri, 312 kilometres per hour. But you saw Lando Norris basically topping the timesheets at will. So how is he so far? How was he sandbagging so much? 308 kilometres, almost 10 kilometres an hour from the rest, from Gabriel Bortoleto. So too Carlos Sainz. And yet and still Lando Norris was able to top the time. That is absolute. I do not understand. This makes no sense whatsoever. I still think that Maximilian Verstappen in that RB21, I hope at the altar of a levelling of the competitive landscape, I still hope that Maximilian Verstappen, so too Sir Lewis and Charles, will be able to fight both OJ Piastri and Lando Norris. But bloody Nora, on the back of that evidence, if Lando is that quick with that engine unit so far turned down, it looks like McLaren, Zach Brown, Andrea Stella, Rob Marshall, Woodall, etc., Pedromo have cured for the ills. It seems like they've made the strengths of the MCL 3.8 stronger and mitigated for its weaknesses. You'll recall it was a medium speed merchant, wasn't it? Anything medium speed E, it could nail the quickest on the grid. But through the high speed stuff, it struggled sometimes. And through the low speed, minimum speed, medium duration turns, it also struggled. Now, however, on the back of this data, 308 kilometres per hour through the speed trap from Lando Norris on his quickest lap. I'm telling you, that is chaos. If you're gonna give me one of those cars going into Australia, car has a name each and every single time, and that car's name is the McLaren. What are we doing here? It's bonkers. Leave my shorty alone. What's Miss RS saying up in the chat? Max is lying, says Umach. We've got. I mean, Max Verstappen fans will be hoping that maybe they are sandbagging, but I don't know what's the upside from sandbagging so much. I mean, do you know what I mean? I'm not sure whether Max is lying, tempering expectations, reducing the pressure on his shoulders. Maybe they're off to the bookmakers Ladbrokes with a view to make some more money, right? Reduce his odds a little more than they've already been reduced. He has everything to live for, so he won't take unnecessary risks. Having a kid does shift priorities. He too would love to raise a racing hair. Mate, I don't disagree. Can you imagine the next? I mean, go on then. Let's pitch it this way. Which child in F1 history has had that sort of lineage? Was Piquet a 3-time champion, and now Max is a 4-time champion? PK winning when? 81, 87. He won another one, didn't he? That evades me. 79, maybe, I can't remember. But a 3-time champion is your granddad, and a 4-time champion is your dad. I mean, bred for victory and success in Formula One, and he. But then that's not. I mean, look at Mick as an example. We all thought Mick was going to be the goatiest. Well, I remember thinking Ralph had to be the goatiest, and Bruno. So I don't know. It's not necessarily a recipe for success being linked or being the family of a great one. Max doesn't take many risks anyway. It's more practice, time focus I'd be concerned about. Teams don't sandbag anymore, says Miami. Don't they? Miami? Don't they, really? So why if teams don't sandbag, is Lando Norris? Maybe that Mercedes engine is just rubbish, all of a sudden. Red Bull Christian sending repeat complaints to the FIA to get further monitoring of flexi parts. If so, McLaren is 3/10. So here's what I'm thinking. If you're going to waterfall the cars from last year to this year, I'm thinking normalise, discount for any improvements made year on year. In my mind, this is what I'm thinking. This is basics, common sense stuff. And I might be barking at the wrong tree here. All in my mind that Red Bull needed to do was add a cheeky mini DRS and add a flexi wing, and then build a chassis and their front suspension around that design philosophy. I say all, but it sounds more complicated now that I'm laying out the full extent of my thesis. But that was, in a nutshell, what they needed to do. They had a brilliant car last year in terms of downforce points in absolute terms. Okay, so it wasn't the most... drivability wasn't its strength. That absolutely wasn't its strong point. But nobody says that car was a dog last year. That car was quick. It was temperamental. It was a bit of a diva, a la a W13, less so than that, but you know where I'm going. Performance curve was one of these, but very difficult to access by dint of the understeer and all of the temperamental handling dynamics. All they needed to do then, apart from all of the aforementioned main two things, put on a bloody flexi wing because they didn't have financial resources to do that in 2024. Put that on and bloody flex the rear wing, and then Bob's your uncle now. This is why I'm thinking that it's been oversold. I just feel like, okay, so McLaren will have made progress at the altar of anti-dive and some of the sexy things that they've done with their wishbone. I get it, but I just think, I don't know, sometimes it's Occam's razor, chat. Don't want to be too much more complicated than that. Kelly loves races. Max's kid and Nelson's grandkid's going to be a monster. That's what I'm saying. You kind of inbreed them like that if you tried. Is that there's never been, genetically speaking, there will never be a child, well, and Sophie as well, who could have been an F1 driver by all accounts, as their grandma. A grandma who could have been an F1 driver, an F1 driver who won 3 world championships as your granddad, and then your daddy's Max Verstappen. Yeah, calm. Yeah, they won't be able to drive at all, that child, McLaren struggling qualifying, but it won't matter. They're probably 15 seconds fast over the course of Surf Source. I'm not buying it. I saw the 12 seconds that Mark Hughes, infinitely more intelligent F1 mind than I, but I don't know. I don't buy it. McLaren may struggle too much. Max's kid will be a pure racer if they want to be. Turtle, unless they have a girl, no chance of F1. Go on then, Turtle, let's talk about this. Why no chance of F1 if it's a girl? If that's the case, then I don't think it should be. I think it's 2025, and I don't know. Why is that about? It's not like it's 100 meters. It's F1. The physical, I don't think, if there are physical barriers to entry to be an F1 driver, I think they're minimal. It's very, very different to athletics or UFC, right? It's driving a car. Yeah, it's endurance, and you can't be weak. No, you need to have your muscle strength in your neck proper and whatever. But I don't know. Oh yeah, by the way, go on, and Cadillac F1 very quickly. We talked about it, but driver-wise, here are the names who are being mentioned: Bottas, Checo, Palo, Herta, Shoei Guan Yu, Yuki Tsunoda, or Daniel Ricciardo. Let me know in the chat who you think is the most likely or the most deserving even. I just don't want to see Checo back. That would be too much for me. I'll be honest with you, I do not want to see Checo back in there. I think that final year's worth of performance is not deserving, unless, of course, it's nepotism and it's Carlos Slim and it's $20 million a year. Bring that in. We can mend some. You can damage the car to the tune of 4 million, and then we can offset that against the 20 that Carlos Slim is going to let us have because of his sponsorship. It's techie. It is techie that I just don't want to see him. I don't want to see, because girls have never been in it. It sucks. Agree with you, Turtle. I mean, you could say that about persons of colour until Lewis popped in, and then you get current. It needs one. Like, listen, if she's good enough, then put her in. Michelle Mouton. Just put her in. I don't know if there's one that exists at the moment, but in the future there will be. Don't come. Benzie says, a Miss Verstappen would test the thesis of a woman driver. Sophie, his mom, should have been an F1 driver. Eddie Jordan says this every single time somebody puts a mic in front of him. That Sophie Kumper was like genius level, like a really, really good driver. That she as far as her karting capabilities and achievements, she raced against some F1 drivers there and beat a lot of them. So I don't know. But Una, listen, as we round third base, Una, you're an absolute legend. I don't know why I can't see you in the chat. I don't like that, and I will fix that shortly hereafter. You guys have been legends. Thank you so much for joining. See you same time tomorrow, as always, with a bit more energy. It's been a long week, but I digress. Between now and next time, prosecution rests. No further questions.